Yes, our God is a mountain mover, and He's still moving mountains every day. And the good news is, He can move your mountains too. Hi there, this is Sue Cooper. Welcome to It's a God Thing radio program. Thanks for joining us today. You're about to hear some awesome interviews with believers in Jesus Christ who will tell you how God has revealed and proved Himself to them by moving mountains they were unable to move by themselves. They say that their stories can only be described as a God thing. Ready for a blessing? Let's roll. Here's our host, Chuck Cooper, with a great God thing story.
Well, we have two guests with us today, Betty Smith and her daughter Linda Lane, both from Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And they have an incredible story to tell about how God intervened to bring Linda home from Lebanon. So, Betty, why don't you start and tell us how in the world did Linda get to Lebanon in the first place?
Well, it really was an interesting story, Chuck. My daughter Linda sort of fell in love with this handsome, continental Arabic young man from Beirut, Lebanon. And they were married and just began to think about all the exciting things that they could do together, especially he wanted to take her home to Lebanon one day to meet his family. They did go right after their honeymoon for a short trip, and just Linda had a wonderful time there. They came back home and began their life in school and everything, and then had their little darling girl, Elise, their baby, and the family just insisted they had to come to Lebanon to visit.
Sure, they wanted to see the grandbaby.
Grandbaby, oh yes. And they'd already met Linda and thought she was a little princess. She was darling, but so they said, we got to see the new baby. So off they went to Beirut again with our little 6-month-old grandbaby, and overseas to the far, far away, we thought. Anyway, at first Linda said it was just wonderful. The family was thrilled to death, of course, with them. They showed them all the wonderful sights. And 2 or 3 weeks after they arrived in Beirut, though, of all things, fighting broke out between the Christian coalition and the Muslims, which had been, stewing for the longest time, and of course they're still doing the same thing today. But this was when it began to break out badly, and in the streets all around the apartment where they lived, the big building they lived in, all was fighting, and also it began to be a little bit dangerous. We heard things, and Linda was writing letters to us and saying, oh, well, it's all right, things have calmed down now. So they went, in one letter she told about going to a Tule, which was a little village up in the mountains where the family went nearly every summer for vacation time and spent most of the summer there off and on, So they went up there, and I was getting letters telling about what wonderful times they were having, but it was very primitive. As Linda's sitting here too, it was just like, you didn't have any electricity much, did you? Or
no, we had electricity, but there were no washing machines. There were no, no air conditioner, no heater. It was their summer home, and Lebanon, Beirut is hot in the summer, and in the 90s, like Florida, kind of on the same latitude, and so it's not a very comfortable place in the summer, and so most of the families, I would say, the Christian families anyway, and probably the Muslim too, I don't know, but they have summer homes.
Yeah, in the mountains.
Especially well-to-do families.
And so that's where they went a lot, and so when summer came, of course, we went. We knew the war had started. We had spent weeks in the stairwell, bombs going on all around us, and
that was in Beirut.
In Beirut.
Okay.
And of course, that's where the fighting was going on mainly.
So you were not near the fighting at that point.
When we first got there, we were, because it was right
in
there.
In
a Tule or wherever you were.
No.
Okay.
We went to the mountains. We weren't. So we made a couple of trips up and down, during the summer, and then, like Mama was fixing to tell you, we went up there toward the end of the summer. Early fall, I think it may have been late August, early September, and got stuck. Fighting, they kept having ceasefires.
Okay.
So fighting would break out, then there'd be a ceasefire, the airports would open, people would go back to work. If they think everything was okay, next thing you know, fighting break out.
Okay.
This was a civil war that ended up lasting 25 years.
So now then, so she's up there and fighting is broken out around her and she can't get out? Is that the idea?
Well, she can't get out, and we didn't know it. Her letters, she was writing long letters about everything that was going on until finally there were no letters, and we didn't have any telephone conversation.
So you didn't know what in the world
I didn't know what was
happened,
happening, no.
Nothing. And how
so,
long did that go on?
Oh, this was the end of September, the last letter I got from her and Ramsey. And Ramsey wrote these details, and it's a little bit telling us a little bit about the war. This is who is against who and all, but it's going to be all right. It'll be over as soon as the government gets back.
So he was being encouraging too.
Encouraging.
Okay.
So, and I had written and said, try to get her, bring them on home. You just bring them home.
Yeah.
But Linda told me later that they were not getting our letters. So by September, October, November, I hadn't heard from her. Her daddy was calling Congressman Bennett, trying to get the embassy to locate the El Haj family, and everyone knew them because they were in charge of the newspaper there.
Right.
And so they were well known there, so we couldn't find Linda. Well, we found out later that Linda had not realized that you must register with the embassy when you come to Lebanon, to a foreign country, and stay for a while.
Don't forget to do that if you ever go out of the country.
And Ramsey didn't tell her to remind her of it, and she didn't know. And so they just
neglected
it.
So the embassy didn't even know she was in the country.
Didn't even know she was there. So when we'd call and write to him and call him, and the congressman and say, we're trying to locate the wife of Ramsey El Haj, they didn't even have any idea that she was there.
Okay, now during this time, Linda, were you still writing letters and posting the letters, and they just weren't getting here?
Well, two of the members of the family worked for Middle East Airlines, and so when the airports would open, they would work. And so off and on during the early part of the summer, late part of the summer, and early fall, I could get a letter to them. I could hand the letter to them.
Okay.
Then when they flew to Frankfurt or wherever Middle East Airlines flies, they could mail the letter for me.
Oh, okay.
Even if the mail wasn't coming out of Beirut, I thought that maybe they were getting these letters out.
Okay.
Obviously, at some point, she stopped getting letters.
Right.
September the 7th was
I stopped getting letters.
10th was the last one.
Because we were at that point stuck. We went for the weekend with a small suitcase,
And
with a pair of jeans and a short sleeve shirt and one pair of shorts and a few little clothes for Elise for the weekend, and we never got back.
Now, were you trying to get back to Beirut? Were you trying to get home? Were you trying to get out of there? No?
I was trying to get out of there.
Oh,
Nobody
okay.
would take her.
They didn't want me to leave. They kept assuring me, like Mom was saying, he assured her in the letters that everything was going to be okay.
Oh, okay.
And that it was going to stop and it was going to go back to normal.
Oh,
well,
okay.
it did last 25 years, so I think I was right. They were wrong,
But anyway,
I wanted to leave. Yes, and I tried to talk them into saying when the airport opens, I want to go back to Beirut.
Sure.
It never did open for many, many, many months. The war fighting got really, really bad.
Get back to get out or anything.
And I couldn't call my mom because there was no...
tell
But
them.
in the meantime, Betty, now y'all were contacting your congressman, trying to make contact
with them.
All right, and now tell us what happened from that.
Well, I kept making phone calls to Beirut and different places, and they didn't know what I was talking about. So I just kept calling. I worked in a real estate office, and my manager said, you can call anytime you want to. So I called one afternoon. I got hold of a voice from the Beirut, and the young man said, yes, I am Antoine. I am a soldier with the Lebanese army, and we have taken over the management of the telephone office here in Beirut. Because of the fighting is so bad, so many people have evacuated, and they're not manning it. And I said, "Oh my goodness!" And he said, "Yes, ma'am." And Madame, he said,
Yes.
What can I do? And I told him all about Linda and Ramsey and the family. Oh, I know the El Haj name. Yes, ma'am. Al Nahar newspaper and all that. And well, I will try to find them. What is the village? And I'd say Tuli up in the mountains. Oh, yes, I've heard of it. I used to go to Jassine. I think that's how I learned Jassine. And he said, I'll keep calling and I'll let you know if I can reach him. Well, a couple of days later, 2 or 3 days later, I'd get a phone call, and it would be, Betty, come to the phone. It's your Arabic guy calling. And he would call and talk to me. And we did this for a month or two, kept calling, and I talked to him some, and I found out about his family.
And still no news about Linda and Elise.
And he began to hear my voice, I think. He wanted to come to America, and he'd say, I'm going to try to find her for you. And we kind of became good friends. So one night about 3 a.m., I was in my home, and the phone rang with this voice came on again and said, and I was sort of half asleep, and he said, Betty, I have Linda. I'm calling the operator in Natuli, and they are running to the house to get Linda, and they will be here in a minute. Hang on. And it was crackly and hard connection. And I said, how did you get her? Bring her to the phone. He said, she's coming. the operator in Justine got a hold of Attila. Here she is. And so in a minute, Linda said, Mama, Mama. She was crying. She could hardly talk,
Yeah.
And it was a bad connection. And she just said, I said, are you all right? I'm okay, but I want to come home, Mama. And she whispered sort of, Mama, send a ticket to the embassy in Israel. Send a ticket.
Airport.
Or the airport. We want to go. And the airport in Tel Aviv, that's right. And then
now, how were you going to, Linda, get from Lebanon and the mountains where you couldn't even get into Beirut? How are you going to get from there to Tel Aviv airport? And how far is it?
We were probably, I'm guessing, I may be wrong on this, but I'm guessing we were 30 to 50 miles from the border of Israel and Lebanon.
Okay.
Tell them about what you told me.
In southern Lebanon, so that's where their village was. I just thought to myself, maybe I can get down to the coast. Maybe I can get a ride to the coast, which is down the mountain, then you get to the beach.
Sure.
You see. So if I got down to the beach, it wouldn't be too far past Tripoli and all that, not Tripoli, Tyre or whatever. I would go down past there, and then I would swim. This is what I thought. I thought
you were desperate.
I was desperate. I said, I will
with the
hold
leash
the
on the
leash
back.
and I'll swim. I thought maybe it was like a border of a county or something. I thought I could just swim from Lebanon over to, right around the border over to Israel. And I don't know. I was desperate.
So now then you all have connected. You know that she's okay. She's trying to get out.
But she's crying and wanting to come home.
Sure. And as a mother and a grandmother, that's hard to take because, you're compassionate and everything. So how'd you get out?
Well,
a couple of months later.
I think in the background, my dad and my mom were both working hard to make everyone know that I was there. That combined with some contacts, with some people, and I finally just convinced my husband that it really wasn't fair to keep Elise there. It's one thing if you want to stay and fight for your country, or if it's your homeland.
But get us out of the war zone.
But just
get us out of there.
Our beautiful little baby girl doesn't deserve to die here. Please, just get us home. If you want to go back, that's fine.
So he finally agreed.
And he finally agreed. And I just think it was. I think it was that phone call. I think it was a miracle that boy, that young soldier, was able to get through. Mm-hmm. And then once that phone call was made, it was, the next time that Beirut airport opened,
you were out of it.
I was allowed to go down to Beirut, and we, got our things together, and
And he did come home with her. He brought her home.
He did bring me home, and so I will have to say.
Could you have come home if he hadn't?
Probably not.
Because you said they didn't want you to leave, but that was the family, correct?
Right. They didn't want me to leave, but Ramsey didn't want to leave.
Yes.
He felt an obligation to his country and his family, and I understood that completely, but there was one little moment where I was alone in the house and everybody was gone, and in the house in Etuli. Mm-hmm. And you look out the window and you can see this beautiful mountains and beautiful scenery, and it was just a beautiful little village. But someone starts screaming to me to shut every window had a shutter, and to shut the shutters and lock them. Mm-hmm. Stay in your house, and I'm like, what? What are you talking about? So I went up to the top floor and I got in the bedroom and I shut the door, and they're screaming, the Palestinians are coming. And so someone had seen a Jeep full of Palestinian soldiers with machine guns coming down the thing. Well, they didn't want them to find an American in the village.
Yeah, of course not.
And so they told me to hide. Yeah. And me and Elise hid, and it was after that.
Probably why.
Yeah, when he finally came home at the end of the day from hunting or whatever they were doing, and there I was alone, scared to death, trembling in the corner in the locked room. I said, this is enough.
She had to get you home.
This is enough. Mom and them are going to bring me home.
So you flew into Jacksonville?
Yes.
Okay. Betty, tell us about the reunion.
Well, when they walked up at the airport, of course, her daddy and all of us were there waiting. And when they came towards us, when this baby had left at 6 months old, and here she was walking in a little red outfit, and didn't know who Tate Elise was. And Linda went, Mama, Daddy. Oh, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And it all because of a Lebanese soldier who decided he cared enough about that American lady to try to find her daughter.
And a Christian.
And a Christian. Yes, he
Oh,
was.
yeah.
He was a
Lebanese
Christian.
soldier.
Many were praying. Mama was
Yes,
praying. I was praying. I mean, there has to be an answer to this. Just find us is all I wanted.
There were two God things. Would you agree that the first God thing is that you connected with Antoine, who just happened to answer the phone after numerous calls you've been making trying to get through to talk to somebody, and that he had empathy for you and sympathy for you, and because of the El Hajj name that he knew, it was very powerful, then he went the extra mile.
Right.
Did you ever talk to him after Linda came home?
He did call me a few times. He did.
Oh,
He said,
great.
well, they didn't come for 2 or 3 months.
Yes, right. I keep thinking, what would have happened if that Jeep had not been spotted in that little community, and which frightened you,
Oh, yeah.
and to the point where your husband finally agreed that he would help you get home. That's another God thing.
That
That's
is a
another
God.
God thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
it made him realize that he couldn't endanger them any longer.
Yeah, I mean,
He
someone came to my house and said, hide. And of course, you got to remember, this is a Christian family, a
Yes.
Christian village. These are Christians.
Yes.
And,
Palestinians were just
they
getting-
were, I'm sure, constantly
Yeah.
in touch with God in this situation and in many situations over there that are very similar to my story.
Yes.
Right.
But I believe that was a God thing, that someone got the news to me to hide.
And it touched Ramsey's
And I
heart.
don't know if I had not been hiding, if they had found me. But the whole point was that it was
But that's what triggered your husband to finally agree.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
what it was. I
Yes,
believe.
yes. I think he realized there was danger. The danger was getting worse. Yeah.
Well, ladies, that's an incredible, incredible story. And we thank you for sharing that. And I know a lot of that's pretty personal, and I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm sure our listeners will. I can't help but think that war that lasted in that particular location for 25 years, that war has been going on in the Middle East for ages and will continue
Almost
to
centuries.
go on for ages, in spite of all the political hoopla about trying to develop a Palestinian state, and that the Israelis and the Palestinians are going to work this out and come out to some agreement. And we've had a lifetime of that, and will continue. Our kids will have a lifetime of that. Then that will only be resolved when Jesus comes again, as he promised.
Amen.
So,
It's
ladies,
sort of-
thank you so much for sharing that. And I didn't mean to go preaching there, but it just made me think about
That's
it.
right.
It's very
So-
touching.
right.
That's the place where it's all going to come to pass in the end, I believe, and that's ready. God will be ready.
Well, thank you. We got 2 God things out of that story. That's great. Thank you so much, ladies. Wow, what a great story. I don't know about you, but we here at It's a God Thing Radio are inspired and encouraged and even awed when we hear stories like the one you're hearing today. We think God Thing stories prove to all who hear them how God continues to work every day in the lives of his believers. We also believe strongly that sharing God Thing stories with not yet believers might just cause them to remember similar events in their own lives. Hopefully, those remembrances will cause them to consider that there may be something to God and Jesus after all. Sharing your own God Thing story, yes, your own story, is a great way to witness to your family, friends, co-workers, schoolmates, and even strangers. Who won't listen when you begin a conversation by saying, "My goodness, you won't believe what happened to me a while back," or, "Gosh, I'm so excited about what happened to a couple at our church. Let me tell you about it." Then tell your own story or share one you've heard here. Doing so just might cause someone to accept Jesus as Savior and Lord. Now let's get back to today's program. A frantic phone call from her young son's school indicated that young Jake was out of control, that he was running up and down the hallway screaming, and that the school was unable to subdue him. Panicked, Angie Martin of Port Orange, Florida, sent her husband to the school to see what was going on. After bringing him home and sitting him down and talking with him, they learned that young Jake was being bullied. Here now, with the rest of the story about how God intervened and miraculously resolved the problem, is Angie Martin.
Well, first of all, my son, his hair is real short. And he came home from school and his hair had been cut. right in the front, in the top. How somebody did that, I don't know, because it's so short. And I asked him what happened, and he said that this little boy had been chasing him with scissors in school, and that he had crawled under his desk to get away from him, and this little boy cut his hair.
Oh my gosh.
So we tried talking to the teacher about it, and she just said, she didn't really say much. She just kind of shrugged it off like we were overreacting. And so I kind of was thinking, all right, it's my, oldest child. He's in kindergarten. Am I overreacting? I don't know, but we'll let it go.
Sure.
And I started noticing really a behavior change in Jake. He wasn't bad at home or anything, but he didn't want to go to school. He was just not himself. And another day we got a phone call from the school saying that my son was out of control, running up and down the halls, that we needed to come and subdue him. They couldn't subdue him. That was the word I was looking for. They couldn't subdue him, so we needed to come to the school right away. So I called my husband because I was at home with the baby. My husband went to the school, went to the front office because that's where you're always supposed to go first.
Right.
And they didn't know anything about it. So they called the teacher over the speaker system, and she said, oh, just send him to the room. We'll talk. Apparently, she said that Jacob had been running up and down the halls, screaming, and they couldn't subdue him. And Jake didn't want to talk about it in front of the teacher. So Jim, just there was nothing he could do right then and there.
Right.
So we brought him home, sat him down to talk to him about it, and he said, Mommy, that little boy was chasing me with scissors again, and I tried to tell the teacher, and she told me I wasn't allowed to talk. So all I could do was run away. I was trying to run away from him, and he was chasing me. Well, he'd only been at this school for a month, and it just wasn't changing.
Right.
There had been conversations with the, the principal there, or whatever the guy is, and he had made a comment that since it was a private school, that they could do whatever they wanted with the money, and they didn't have to hire helpers or aides or anything, because this teacher had 28 students alone. She did not have any help. And so...
And these were kindergartners?
These were kindergartners.
28?
Yes. And...
3 are hard to have.
We just felt, I know, we just felt like, we're paying all this money for him to go to a private Christian school. He would be better off in public school, even. Right. And so my mom had said, well, why don't you call Warner Christian and see if they have any openings? And I said, Mom, they have a waiting list. I am not going to call them. Besides, school's already started for the year. We're a month into it. And she said, okay. And then Jim had said, why don't you call Warner Christian and see if they have any openings? I said, Jim, they're not going to have any openings. Warner Christian's like the busiest Christian school. It's not going to happen. And then my mother-in-law was over another day. And it was on a Thursday, and she said, did you ever call Warner Christian to see if they had any openings? Why don't you call them? And I said, just give me the phone book. I'll call right now.
Can you hear me now, Angie?
Yeah, really. So I called and talked to the principal, Miss Robinson, and she said, oh, it's funny that you called today. She said, we just took a little boy out of kindergarten and put him back in preschool, so we have one spot open. Just came open today.
My gosh.
And I said, well, what do we got to do to talk to you? She said, well, why don't you and your husband come in? We have to interview and all, and we'll talk. So we went in the next day, which was Friday morning, and talked to her about it and kind of told her what was going on. And so we were getting ready to leave. She was kind of, tying up the meeting. Yes. And I said, so when will we be notified if he's accepted here or not? She goes, oh, he can start Monday.
Now, this was Friday?
This was Friday. So we just kind of looked at each other and, and what was funny was before we actually met with her, we were sitting out in the hallway waiting for her to come out and get us.
Right.
And this teacher walks out with her class, and she was so loving towards them. And it was just a totally different feel than the school he was at.
Right.
And Jim and I just made a comment to each other about how great she seemed with the kids. Well, that turned out to be Jake's teacher.
Oh, my goodness.
And, long story short, he started that Monday. We called the old school Friday as soon as we got into the car after the meeting with the principal and told them we were withdrawing him from the school. What do we need to do? And they said, oh, nothing. We'll have his books ready when you pick him up today. So ever since then, he's been at Warner, and he loves it, and we love it. They don't put up with bullies there, and much smaller class sizes and that type of thing. And you can just tell that they know how to handle the kids there.
I think, Angie, this story indicates that you all got a double God thing story.
Yep.
First of all, that there was room for him.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, that had you called a day earlier, it wouldn't have happened.
Probably not. No.
And maybe even thirdly, that he got that loving, caring teacher.
Mm-hmm. She was great. And every teacher he's had since then, he's in 2nd grade now, has just been wonderful.
So, I think the answer to my final question is pretty obvious. But Angie, I'll ask you anyway. Do you think that how the Lord orchestrated all this to get him into the school in the situation where he is now was a God thing?
Absolutely.
Got a problem in my pathway. I feel a frozen peak. Doubts are circling high above me, but in the shadow.
Wow, what a great half hour this has been. It's our hope that you have been inspired, encouraged, awed, and intrigued by what you heard today. We earnestly pray that hearing these stories as a regular listener to our program will be a source of hope and encouragement to you, that these stories will strengthen your faith in God and will lead you to a closer walk with Jesus. Whether you are a believer in Jesus Christ or a not yet believer, we pray that you will reflect on the God thing incidents in your own life and conclude that it was God at work and that he was knocking on your door. If you have a God thing story of your own, or you know someone who does, we'd love to hear about it. Just email a brief summary to mystory@itsagodthingradio.com. That's mystory@itsagodthingradio.com. Or you can call us at 770-500-2400. See you next time.